What's going on, Salt Strong Nation? It's Matt and the Yak, and I want to answer some questions I've been getting for the past few weeks. How did you catch those winning redfish in Jacksonville for the Florida Redfish Series stop in Jacksonville? And they were tough conditions. I'm going to be honest with you. We had winds, we had rain. They were some tough conditions. And on top of that, we had a 6-foot tide swing. It was out of control, but I did come home with a first place trophy in all three divisions for the kayak division. So it was a pretty great day, but I do want to share with you guys a little bit about how I was able to bring that win back with one of these KVD Strike King wake baits. Now let's go ahead and get into what is a wake bait. A wake bait is one of these baits, and it is originally a bass fishing lure and technique that is ultimately designed as a shallow running crankbait. Now, this one that I'm holding up right here is a Strike King KVD wake bait. If you guys can see there at the front, there is a almost flat shaped bill there that keeps this bait running shallow. Now, this is just one of the options or color options that we have here at Salt Strong for this particular bait, but it's super effective for inshore applications. Now, if you guys would like to see a review that we've done on the KVD wake bait for inshore applications, we'll be sure to link that video down below. But it's essentially a shallow running crankbait that is designed to stay in the top portion of the water column. It's supposed to stay at or near the surface. Now, if you work this on a retrieve slow enough to keep it at or near the surface, it will leave a really nice wake behind it as it begins to wobble coming through the top of the water column. Now, that's super effective for attracting those bigger fish because they just cannot resist that fleeing bait fish look at the top of the surface. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, how is this effective inshore? How will this work for me? Now, as we start to get into these warmer months, a lot of that bait fish that we were missing during the winter starts to return back to the shallows. Now, it starts coming back from those offshore areas, and when it starts moving back into the shallows, looking for those warmer, more comfortable conditions, that's when those predators start to hunt the shallows as well, looking for those bait fish. So that's one of the reasons why this right here is so effective during these warmer months. Now, we all know as we come out of these cooler months, these redfish start to shift their diet from crabs and crustaceans to more of a bait fish pattern. They'll start to feed on mullet and pinfish, not just those crabs and shrimp and other shellfish that they were particularly having to feed on during the colder months when the bait was scarce. But just as those redfish start to switch their feeding pattern, those flounder, snook, and trout, they start showing up and they're ready to feed in those shallow areas as well. So these wake baits just really do a great job of attracting those predators. Now, as I said about attracting those predators, another really awesome key feature about this bait is its rattle. If you guys can hear this, it has a really nice low frequency rattle that does a great job at attracting those fish from a long distance away, especially if you have some windy or choppy conditions. That rattle is really effective at bringing those fish in. Now, I've tested out a lot of different styles and designs of wake baits, and I've found that these KVDs with their low frequency rattle to be the most consistent for calling these fish in all types of conditions. Now, it's been one of my go-to search baits because of this rattle. It makes it super effective when you're using it as a search bait to try and power fish a shoreline or an area to kind of key in on feeding fish. Now, as you're able to work this wake bait on a steady retrieve or a quick retrieve, you're able to cover a lot more water than you would if you were working something slower or even a topwater with a walk the dog action. And as you move it faster, that just agitates the rattle inside, thus calling those fish in from further away. Now, I've kind of already touched on it a little bit already, but let's go ahead and dive on in with actually when you can use this wake bait. Now, one of our insider members, John Hibberts, actually asked a really good question. Is it like a topwater where you can only use it in the morning or in the evening? Does it have a best time to be used? And actually, John, that's a really good question because one of the awesome things about these wake baits is they do not have any time restrictions or condition restrictions to them. So if you're in clear water conditions, there's a color pattern like this natural shad that would work really well. But if you're in dark water conditions, this chisel color with a more solid color pattern would work even better. So there's not really a water clarity that these are restrained to. Now, as far as conditions, if it's cloudy or if it's clear overhead, does it work when the sun is shining or does it work when it's raining? I can confirm that this bait works in all conditions, whether it's raining, whether the winds are blowing, whether it is flat calm, or whether the sun is shining. I have won tournaments with this bait in all of those conditions. Most recently in Jacksonville with a winning 26-inch redfish on one of these exact baits. So I can tell you that no matter whether you're in the rain and 25-mile-an-hour winds like I was, they still work. Now, another question we get asked is about what depth you can use this wake bait at. So I'd like to mention that one thing that I have found is it is most effective in 4 foot or less. Now, I have found it to work in 6 foot as well, but that is when I find that those fish are willing to come up towards the surface of the water to feed. That's often when there's, say, maybe a school of bait or something that's hanging closer near the water surface, and I can see that bait moving near the top. That's when I'll be able to use it in those deeper conditions when I've identified bait in the area. But I usually typically like to use this as a shallow water search bait. Now, with that in mind, how shallow can you go with this? Now, I do like to use this in crazy shallow conditions. I have used this, as I said, on my recent tournament in Jacksonville, and I was actually throwing this in inches of water. But there was pluff mud underneath it, so the lipped bill of this wake bait was actually digging into the mud. Now, I was digging into the mud an inch or two because that pluff mud is really soft, and I think those redfish were identifying one of these wake baits as a crab coming through the mud. Whether they identified it as a crab or bait fish, it didn't matter. They were crushing it. Now, one of the really cool things about these, as I said, is it doesn't matter what the depth is as long as you're not going to get snagged. You can run it as shallow as you want, and you can bang the front of that thing right off of any structure. If you guys can see right there, you'll see that this one right here has actually been through some battle, and it's been banged off quite a bit of structure. So as long as it's not going to hang up, you should be okay. So with all of that in mind, that makes these wake baits one of the most versatile lures that should be in your box during these warmer months. For those of you that watch my videos, you know I do not leave the house without one of these tied on one of the 8 rods in the back. So that should tell you how effective these are if I always have one with me and I'm always using them to search for these fish. As my friend and fellow fishing coach Pat Ogletree says, these things are like the paddle tails of topwaters, and I really couldn't agree with that more. They draw in those really big strikes from fish like a topwater will, but they are used in a search bait way. You can often cover a lot of ground with these baits, and if you need to just dial in a bite in a certain pocket or a cut, they're a great way to do that as well. So just if there's any confusion, I have been telling the Salt Strong insiders for some time now how effective these wake baits can be. These things not only produce a lot of fish, they produce monster fish. And one of our insiders, my main man Cody Jackson, was actually throwing one of these KVD wake baits and pulled in a unit of a redfish with a 46-inch bull redfish on one of these wake baits. So that goes to show you not only how effective these things are, but the quality of fish they catch. So good job, my man Cody, and it just goes to show you that I'm not the only one having this type of success, and I'm sure you will too if you just apply yourself to using them. Now, talking about using these wake baits, that's going to be a perfect segue into this next section. Now, I'd like to point out that there are a few different retrieves that I like to use with these wake baits, and truthfully, that would make this video very long, but I will link those videos down below as well. Now, furthermore, to have the type of success that I talk about with these wake baits, I strongly believe that you have to have the right gear. You need to be throwing it with the right equipment and have the right tools for this bait, because if you're throwing it with the wrong gear or with the wrong equipment, you're not going to have the right effectiveness and you're not going to have the type of success that I've been having. So again, I will link a video down below that will show you my preferred wake bait setup. Again, this isn't to say that this is the end all be all, but I can tell you that I've been using this exact setup. Nothing has changed for over a year, and I will continue to use this setup as is unless something proves itself to be better. But again, this is what I like to use, so I will link that video down below as well. And lastly, one of the final videos I will link down below is a good one. It's about how to change the hooks on these wake baits to get them from looking like this with these dangerous treble hooks that will often break and bend, to these single inlines that are going to be a little bit more structurally sound for that salt water. Again, these hooks right here are not made for salt water, not just the salt water, but the fish in them as well. Those hooks just cannot stand up to the pressure that these inshore species can put on them. So I will link the video on how to change these hooks down below so that you're set up for success. Just so you guys know, we do have these available in our tackle shop at fishstrong.com. Keep in mind that our insider members do save 20% or more on all of their tackle in our tackle shop. So if you're interested in some amazing discounts, or you'd like to see exactly where we caught some of these fish that I've included in this video, make sure you check us out at saltstrong.com or at the link below. If you have any questions about this wake bait, the setup, or anything I like to use as far as the tactics with this bait, or if you guys have any other freshwater bass lures that you'd like me to try out inshore, make sure you let me know about that down in the comments as well, and I'll be sure to give them a try on one of my next trips. As always, we appreciate you guys watching. Leave those comments down below, smash that like button, be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.